The following program has been arranged by the Division of Game and Fish.
Here is the story of the Bluegrass State's great outdoors.
This is Kentucky Afield.
Kentucky Afield.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield.
Kentucky Afield. More than 50 years. And still fit as a fiddle.
This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Bagley.
If you don't like the weather in Kentucky, wait a minute, it'll change. Not true. But the variety of weather systems that we do have in our region of the country give us lush landscape, 4 full seasons, healthy river systems, and more. We go inside outdoors with the head of the National Weather Service in Louisville and chat about the one thing that will make or break our day, our fishing, our picnic, and whether or not we will wash the car. It's a nice day to talk about the weather. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Navy Air Rescue swimmer Luigi Caprio.
If it's 2 a.m., a tsunami, or freezing cold, 2 tools make a difference: a calm voice and a life jacket. On a lake or a pleasure boat, there may come a time you're called upon to do my job. Accidents happen. I am a rescue swimmer, and I am here to help you. Life jackets. They live up to their name every day and night.
Kentucky Fish and Wildlife reminds you, your life jackets got your back, and the backing of the best swimmers everywhere.
That fish weighed 10 pounds.
10. That's the magic word.
Honey, I hadn't been there 10 minutes.
If he says 10, he's lying. And he says 10 a lot.
You gotta be happy you married me.
I can hear it coming.
Admit it. I'm your perfect 10.
Honey, why don't you take 10?
Tenfold.
Your Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, fishing's not about math. It's about fun.
And fudge it a little if you need to.
Kentucky Fishing. Be honest.
It'll make a liar out of you.
Baglin here, and many people declare themselves weather experts. If it is a cool day in June, suddenly the world is ending. Crazy weather we're having. The more you know about anything, the more sense it suddenly makes. And my guest today has forgotten more about weather than most of us will ever know. He is John Gordon, the meteorologist in charge of NOAA's National Weather Service Forecast Office in Louisville. So, whatever you think you know about weather, put that on hold for the next hour. We'll talk to a fellow who's basically done it all, and there's not much out there that surprises him.
Something really unusual. I did something that very few people on Earth do. I flew hurricanes for 15 years with the hurricane hunters in Mississippi.
Find a few?
106 of them, including Katrina, so that was fun, but I'm glad to be on the ground.
Go ahead and tell me that story about hurricane hunting. How's it work?
Well, there's a crew. It's Air Force reservists. They're out of Biloxi, Mississippi at Keesler Air Force Base. They fly missions for the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Most of our missions in tropical storms and hurricanes are 10 to 11 hours in a C-130. And it's a 4-engine turboprop. We're not very fast. Kind of like the C-130s here at the Air National Guard here in Louisville. And they have a bunch of fancy weather equipment, and we fly to do a bunch of weather work for the Hurricane Center, including position, sea level pressure, maximal wind speeds, etc.
So you don't trust fly through or over the hurricane?
We fly right through it at 10,000 feet and 180 knots. We're in the storm, about 7 hours normally. And so I got to go to some nice places, Charlie. I got to go to the Virgin Islands, to St. Croix and Antigua and Barbados, and flew out of the Gulf Coast, a lot of places like Houston and Miami and Charleston. And we've been blessed since I've left. I left in 2007. We really haven't had any major hurricanes in the United States. We had Irene and Sandy and Ike, but nothing like my last 4 years. I had Isabel, Katrina, Ivan, flew a lot of big ones the last few years.
I still can't get past flying through a hurricane. Wouldn't that just blow the plane all over the sky?
No, we fly with the wind. It's kind of like you pick your favorite quarterback in football, Peyton Manning or whatever, but we throw the ball out with the wind, basically. We use the wind, we angle out and use a track heading of the wind. The wind's 90 degrees off the left side of the plane, so it's kind of like a spiral going into the center. Now, the unpleasant part is the eye wall. That food service is discontinued. That's a joke. So it gets a little bumpy in there. Usually when a storm is steady state, they're not changing intensity, they're not that turbulent, but when they change states, they can get viciously turbulent. Very bad. When you can't read the instruments, and you're saying a prayer.
And so you're in the eye of the storm, and now you have to fly out of it. And
Right, you're right. You go 105 miles into the storm, wind left side off the aircraft, and you go through at least one eye wall. Some storms have 2 or 3 eye walls. That's a really intense band of thunderstorms, a lot of lightning, actually. And then you get in the eye, and the winds drop off significantly at the lowest pressure, the lowest winds, and the highest temperature. And then you got to go back through the eye wall and do the same thing again and go 105 miles out to the end point, and then you do what's called, it's like an alpha pattern. If you grew the Greek letter alpha, that's basically our pattern.
My wildest imagination can't keep up with your real life.
I wanted to do this when I was 6 years old, so I feel very blessed, and I want to do weather when I was a young kid. I suspect if you ask most of the TV Mets you see on TV, they wanted to do this at a very young age. So I got to live my dream.
The Kentucky Afield Radio show has an audience of people who like the outdoors, who like to boat, hunt, fish, that sort of thing. But it's out there for any and everybody because nature belongs to everybody.
Right.
Nature certainly includes weather.
Right.
And so I have several sheets of questions here. Don't know that we'll get through all of them because
fire away.
That's why they teach degrees in this and courses in this and master's degrees in this, and they talk longer about it than just for 45 minutes or an hour. We'll hit some of the highlights best we can.
Sounds great. I'm ready to go.
How predictable is the weather?
Well, we've improved probably since you were watching TV some years ago when you were a kid. Years ago, you might remember in Louisville, Diane Sawyer did the weather.
Really?
Yeah, that was, I think, in the 70s. David Letterman did it in Indianapolis. Pat Sajak did it in Nashville, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Willard Scott on the Today Show. Willard Scott was the first Ronald McDonald in America. Willard Scott knows nothing about weather, but he's got charisma and personality.
That's true.
So that has evolved into what you see on TV today and in meteorology. Predictable the weather, we have improved dramatically in the first 3 days of the forecast. There's no question. You see dramatic improvement. So whether if you're a hunter, you're a fisherman, whatever, somebody wants something different. If you're an outdoorsman who does hang gliding, wind is very important. Well, that's not very important to a lot of other people, so it's all relative to what you want. So in the first 72 hours of the forecast accuracy on most parameters, temperature, wind, precipitation is still probably the most problematic thing we do, has improved to a very high level, and the deep extended has improved. We now go out to 7 days here at the Weather Service. So
that's something, the extended forecast, what some TV stations may call the 8-day or the 10-day extended outlook.
Right.
And from where I'm standing, that's probably just for entertainment purposes. How close really can you get today versus 25 years ago?
It's improved in the extended, and I will tell you, I share a little bit of your sentiment. I mean, I have a really good friend on TV. I won't call him out, but he goes out 14 days. The 14-day forecast I'm not a big fan of, except with one caveat. I kind of like the terms cooler, drier, wetter. Things of that nature I think are good. But for me to tell you in any city in Kentucky that 2 weeks from today the temperature is going to be this and the wind's going to be this and the precipitation will be this is just make-believe. We actually get calls from some mothers of brides who want to know about a wedding in August and to give a indoor-outdoor wedding. You know, there's no way. I mean, the summer is very... a lot of people would think you've got to be bored at the Weather Service in the summer, John. You've got to be very bored. But that's not true because it's hot and humid. That's true. But where those isolated thunderstorms are going to form, that's a big problem. We have not improved a great deal on afternoon summer thunderstorms. I mean, it's a big deal if you're planning a fishing tournament on Rough River Lake or whatever. You know, the 20% of thunderstorms is all over the lake, and, you know, lightning kills people or whatever.
You never know.
If you want to be humbled, become a meteorologist. You'll be humbled immediately.
If you really want to know, ask me a day or two or three before.
That's right.
You hear in Kentucky, and I'm presuming that's because we're sort of a mid-Atlantic state. We have 4 seasons here, summer, spring, winter, fall, versus what Alaska may have or Key West, Florida may have. And you hear people say, oh, this is bizarre weather we're having. If we have a snowflake in late April, oh, that's just bizarre weather we're having. If we have a warm day in December, oh, that's just... And you hear this. How bizarre is the weather? Is the weather just being the weather?
Yeah, I think people have short memories. I'm a big fan of historical weather. If you ever see me talk or you look up my name on the internet, you'll see that I do a lot of historical weather talks. Recently, we just did the April 3rd, 1974. I don't know where you were, Charlie, but in 1974, the big tornado outbreak.
Yes, I remember those tornadoes.
Right, and I use those events to scare young kids, quite honestly, to prepare them for the next big event. But we haven't had one in Louisville or Lexington in some time, and people lose perspective and don't know that in the 1930s, it was the highest temperature ever in Kentucky was reported in Greensburg, Kentucky, at 114 degrees. People think it can't get 114. Well, it did.
Buddy, you could fry an egg on the sidewalk that day. John Gordon, meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service Forecasting Office in Louisville, is my guest. I'm Charlie Baglin, and you are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio, and I don't know if it's because people are just unhappy with the weather. And if the weather doesn't suit them, then they officially are quick to declare that something's wrong. Funny how others live in the same state, on the same planet, experience the same weather, don't really notice it, aren't really caught off guard like other people are. John Gordon, Chief Meteorologist at the National Weather Service Forecasting Office in Louisville, is my guest. And what do you see, John?
People seem to forget the 94 snowstorm that paralyzed the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where, between 9 and 18 inches of snow shut down all the interstates and parkways and everything. People seem to forget that in 1937, the most significant event in the history of Kentucky was the 37 flood, where you had, for instance, in Louisville, as an example, the McAlpin Dam upper is 52 feet. It hit 30 feet above that. I mean, picture that. That means the Falls of the Ohio Interpretive Center, for all you outdoors people, that's a great place to go right across the river.
Right.
That thing's underwater in 1937. So what I think's going on with the Twitter and Facebook and the social media revolution is people have a very short memory. And that I can show you, I mean, for instance, when I went to college, I was taught that tornadoes can't go up and down mountains. Well, we've proved that wrong. Tornadoes typically don't hit cities. Well, that's not right. There's a bunch of cities that have been hit. So there's a lot of things that are just short memory. The specific question you asked was about snow in April. Snow in April is not uncommon. So it snowed on the Derby here several years ago. Now, if it snows in June, then we know there's maybe Armageddon's coming, okay? That would be unusual. Highly, highly improbable. But people have very short memories, I believe. Key West is not going to change. But Louisville, in the Ohio Valley, in the middle of the country, is a collision between the cold air to the north and the Gulf of Mexico air to the south, the dry southwest air over Mexico and New Mexico, Arizona, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. So there's a transition zone where you're going to have wild swings from time to time, where this winter was a very cold winter, right? It was a very cold winter, but it doesn't even make the top 10 list for snowiest winters in Louisville. Now, I tell people that, and their face they just can't comprehend it. They think it's the worst winter because they have short memories or they're too young to remember. I think, Charlie, you're old enough to remember the winters of 77, 78.
Indeed, I am.
So those were really bad. Now, if you have a worse winter than 78, you know it's bad because they'll break the records. So it's all perspective here. Whereas in Chicago or Detroit, they had one of the snowiest winters in their lifetime. There's no question. But around here, we're going to have, like you said, the transition zone is exactly correct.
A season's in transition. So if you go from winter to summer, you're going to have, as March, April approach, you're going to have a lot of winter, and then you'll have less and less winter, but you'll have a little spring, a little summer thrown in there, and you'll get a mixed bag of everything.
Right, you're exactly right. That's well said. I completely agree.
And I would say likewise, conversely, if you're going to go from the heat of the year into winter, you're going to have a lot of heat, and you'll have some warm days even into November and even December.
Well, all your listeners on this show can tell you, if you're a hunter or you're a fisherman, you're an outdoorsman, you're a hiker, I mean, you go out especially in the spring. This fall is usually the best, in my opinion, in Kentucky. If you want to go on vacation, go in October. Nothing beats October. I mean, it's in the 70s every day.
Yeah.
We don't get that much precipitation. And the spring is a very tumultuous time where you go from the cold of winter, as you said, and you'll have some warm spells here and there, and if you get a warm spell, you might get a tornado outbreak. And then you might go right back to cold. And we may have another warmth. And it's a mixed bag. I completely agree.
All right, let's look at it this way. And maybe for anybody who's thinking Armageddon is right around the corner. Let's say you have an average, you see the TV meteorologist say, well, the average is 75 degrees. And so we're 2 degrees off average. So it's 77 and it should be 75. Well, we're close to average. What if it were 80? And the next day it was 70. And so it all averages out to be 75 again.
Right.
What if you, and it's fine when everything starts averaging back to the middle, then that's great. But what if you have extremes, say it's 90 degrees?
Okay,
and then
that's a great question.
A couple days later, instead of 75, it's 60. Or it's 100 degrees. Then you have a cold front move through, and next thing you know, it's 50 degrees. It all averages back to 75 degrees. So I'm wondering, is the average a little misleading?
Let me answer all that together. The normal high is one of the most misunderstood things of all. You're correct. They're based on what's called the mean, the normal of the day. So you take the high and the low and you divide them by 2. Then you do, of all those, you do a 30-year average. That's the normal. So right now, every 10 years, they update the normals. Like, I don't know what today average would be, something, today's high, it would average out to whatever, mid-70s or whatever. So you look at the normals and you relative to those 30-year normals. In those 30 years, there's cyclical periods where you have warmer temperatures over a 10-year period, you have cooler temperatures over a 10-year period because of various things such as ocean currents and, all things of that nature. You look at the normals and it puts things in a bit of context that if you hit 90 today, we're above normal, but next week we could be in the 50s, which is below normal. In the end, it will come out somewhat to those points. But certainly there are years where you have, like right now, you cannot deny that there's a drought out in California. If you're an outdoors person in California, there's concern. Serious concern. There's a drought. So when you look at the normal precipitation value over a 10-year period out west, it's going to be lower than it's been in a long time because of the drought. So it's all a bit of perspective. I always think it's funny. If you have a high of 80 and a low of 60, 80 plus 60 is 140 divided by 2 is 70. And if the normal high happens to be 60, people are like, oh my God, it's just so hot out, so hot out. People just, you have to look at a perspective.
Talking about droughts, you saying that reminded me of a conversation I had with a total stranger at my local YMCA. I said, so what do you do for a living, sir? And he says, well, I'm a hydrologist. And he starts talking about rivers and drainage from cities and sewer districts and the whole bit. And it's clearly he knew what he was talking about. And my question to him was, so are we, yes or are we not, running out of water? He says, no, we're not running out of water. We've always had the same amount and always will have the same amount. But you got to remember there are more people, and our bodies are X% water, and all the water is now more and more being contained in people. And I thought, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, there's an interesting debate on that. I will tell you for sure there is problems in the western United States. There's no question. There's overpopulation. There is drainage, it gets to court every once in a while. You see court cases getting involved with the water from the Colorado River. You see court cases from the Great Lakes of using the water. And the problem with the Great Lakes, you have Canada. It's not just the United States. So there is what I call water wars. I'm a down the road guy, Charlie. It gets into the debates like climate change and global warming. You can't forge data as scientists. That's against the rules. There's no question in my mind, objective data would support that places in the western United States are going to have serious problems and some big decisions are going to have to be made because there's X amount of water, and you have places like golf courses. Does a golf course get as much right as a landowner? Does a landowner have a right to sprinkle their own lawn? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm glad the Ohio River comes by my neck of the woods.
Yeah, I've heard it said that there are places in the west, arid west, where you may not own the water even as it falls on the roof. You cannot collect it, whereas in Kentucky, you can.
Yeah, I didn't hear that, but I have a cistern in my house, 120 gallons. Every time it rains, I don't need to use my hose. My garden has free water.
Well, speaking of global warming, I've heard one scientist say the Earth goes through cycles. Every 20, 25,000 years, we'll have a cold snap. We'll have an ice age. Presumably, we've come out of the ice age. It's been pretty good for thousands of years. But could it be that now we are going to the other extreme?
Let me just touch the ice thing first. Believe it or not, there was a mini ice period in the late 1600s, early 1700s, in the Scandinavia and northern part of Scotland and Europe. Most people don't know that. Secondly, is the Earth warming at this very moment based on objective data? Yeah, it is a little bit. Yes, it is. Now, why is it warming? There is a contribution of man. As a outdoorsman myself, I want to take care of Mother Earth. You want to take care of everything you can. On the other hand, we don't know what the contribution of man is to the climate change. Charlie, do you know what the number one polluter in the world is?
I'm going to guess automobile exhaust.
That's a good guess. Well, the answer is volcanoes. Volcanoes have been around since the beginning of time, as far as I know, and so they put up a lot of pollutants. Well, so does mankind through automobiles, deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. If you think that your particular place that you live in is polluted, go to Shanghai, China. China is the biggest polluter in the world. People have to wear masks into certain places in China. Mexico City is another very, very polluted place. There's a lot of polluted places. So is the Earth warming? Yes, it is. Does the Earth go up and down in cold and warm snaps? Yes, it does. Should we be taking better care of the Earth? Yeah, I do. I really would like to enjoy the outdoors as much as all of your listeners on the show.
John, music is playing. That means we need to take a break. John Gordon is our chief meteorologist for forecasting weather in Kentucky out of the Louisville National Weather Service office. Knots, thunder snow, and other odd weather terms. And when you can safely predict when the amount of snow you're about to get is about to double. It's all ahead. I'm Charlie Baglin, and you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. We hope you'll find us on Facebook. Pass along your comments or suggestions. Go to Facebook, search box, spell it out, Kentucky Afield, A-F-I-E-L-D, radio. Be sure to put radio on there or it may stop at Kentucky Afield TV. So put radio, like us, and you'll like us. It is time now for our fishing report.
Hi, this is John Williams with the Fishery Report for Southeast Kentucky. At Lake Cumberland, striped bass fishing has been very good of late, especially early in the morning. Most of those fish are being caught on alewives, 15 to 20 feet deep early in the day. Also seeing some jump activity on occasion in the morning. Most of those are mid to lower lake, good-sized fish, 26 to 30 inches long. Also on Lake Cumberland, the crappie fishing has been very good of late. Some limits of crappie being caught. Those are jigged and minnows around 20 feet deep in some of the flooded vegetation that's in the lake now. Elsewhere in the district, at Laurel Lake, hearing some good reports of smallmouth and largemouth being caught on spinners and jigs, especially at night or at dawn and dusk, primarily on the main lake. So give that a try as well. As always, good luck and good fishing.
At Kentucky and Barkley Lakes, right now the big thing is thinking about blue cats out on the ledges using cut bait, shad, small bluegill, and even silver carp. Hearing a big thing about silver carp. Everybody's using some silver carp and having good luck on catching some blue cats. And also the old typical large minnows work out there on the ledges. White bass, again, going back out to the river channels using spoon or some inline spinners on those drops. I like to fish kind of like in the bends where there's maybe a little bit of eddying currents, maybe where a secondary channel comes in and hits the main channel. Seems like to be some good places to target the white bass and use that for your blue cats. And the big thing growing down here with all the silver carp, big head carp below the dams is bow fishing. So look on the internet about some bow fishing things going on in the tailwaters. A lot of people going down there in the evenings shooting big heads and silver carp. Well, this is Paul Reister, and I hope you find a good day to go fishing.
This is Rob Rold in the Northwestern Fishery District with some angling opportunities in our area. At Nolin, white bass are active in the jumps. Anglers have been catching several in the Wax to Dog Creek area especially, and then somewhat even on down lake to Canalaway and the Moody Deer areas of the lake. Most effective way of fishing these jumps is using casting spoons or using a surface bait that makes a lot of noise, like the popping baits or blade bait. Anglers are also picking up white bass at night. Rough River Lake, the hybrid striped bass are acting much like the white bass at No Land. They're in the jumps early, late in the day. At both reservoirs, crappie are also still active if you can find some deeper brush piles. That's an update from the Northwestern Fishery District. Be safe on the water and always wear your life jacket.
Meteorologist John Gordon is with us from the National Weather Service this hour on Kentucky Afield Radio. We're discussing weather, forecasting, storm systems, jargon, and what's wise and what's lore. Back with more after the break.
In the news, whales have been spotted in Kentucky waters. We have an expert standing by on the water's edge.
There goes the bobber. Set the hook.
Daddy, it's a whale.
Way to go, buddy.
Childlike wonder for the outdoors. It still exists. Where to go, what to take, and how to get started are waiting at the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website, fw.ky.gov. Take a kid fishing. Don't let the opportunity get away.
What's wrong?
I caught my wife in a lie.
That's bad.
We're fishing, right?
Yeah.
She catches a catfish, 4-pounder, claims it was a 7, snaps a picture, sends it to all her friends.
And they bought it?
Yeah, people believe her.
You taught her well.
Indeed I did.
Your Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, fishing's not about math, it's about fun.
And fudge it a little if you need to.
Kentucky Fishing, be honest.
It'll make a liar out of you.
Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio for the rest of the hour. We are talking to John Gordon. He oversees the National Weather Service office in Louisville. What about weather above the clouds? How far up does weather go, John?
That's a great question. As I flew hurricanes for 15 years, so I can tell you there's a lot of clouds, information above the clouds. When you fly out of an airport, we have to do the base heights of all the clouds. So not just the one you see today. We have puffy cumulus at 4,000 feet. To a pilot, that's a big deal. We forecast as forecasters basically everything in the lowest 50,000 feet on the earth, from the earth to the 50,000 foot level. That's the weather that affects the earth in the United States and Kentucky. So we try to understand the moisture, the temperature, the pressure, the wind fields, the wind direction, and all types of those parameters in the lower part of the atmosphere. So just because the cloud that you see above your house, there's many more clouds or many more things above it. Like for tornadoes to form, we look at the wind shear and the wind direction. Now winds change with height and with speed, and why some situations will get tornadoes and other situations we won't.
Another question, what is the difference between a knot and miles per hour?
1.14 miles per hour, so 50 knots is 58 miles per hour.
That's a seagoing term,
yes,
right?
Yes, it is, right.
And so miles per hour doesn't apply there.
Correct, right. The United States, we did not go to the metric system, so quite honestly, my forecasters here forecast miles per hour, but they use knots to go to miles per hour. They use Celsius to forecast Fahrenheit.
The wind is at 6 knots.
Right.
Can you generalize that for just somebody like me?
Sure.
To say
I'd say 5 to 10 miles per hour on the water today. Boom.
Okay, that takes care of that question. And I know that was pressing in many people's minds.
Sure, we're here to answer.
Thunder snow. I've never heard thunder snow, but I've heard about it.
That's more complicated. And basically, if you ever see thunder snow, you see thunder and lightning and snow, however much snow they're forecasting, let's say they're forecasting 4 to 6, if you see thunder snow, you double that number.
We seem to have a couple of times during the year where we really have some bad weather. Hurricane season and that spring tornado season.
Right.
When did they run? What are there some generalized dates for those?
That's a good question. Yeah, hurricane season runs in the United States runs June 1st through November 30th. Severe weather season depends on where you live, but for Kentucky, normally is the end of March, April, May, and the first part of June. Although I tell everyone I give a lot of talks, a lot of rotaries and things, and I always tell them that if it gets really warm in the winter, really warm, that someone's going to die. Because when you have a collision of warm and cold air in the off seasons like January, February, the atmosphere is just super prime. There's a lot more wind shear. The book answer would be April, May, June, but reality is some of the worst tornado outbreaks in the country are in the cool seasons.
Here's something I want you to address. You've heard people say, well, they say it's going to be a really tough winter. They say, so this is July. And say, well, this is the logic they apply. We had a really warm, really hot summer. That means it's going to be a really cold winter. And I don't know where they come up with A leads to B. Have you heard these scenarios?
Yeah. There's actually groups of people who do very long forecasting. We don't do that here at the local offices. So in Kentucky, you have 5 offices serving the state, in Paducah, Louisville, Jackson, Wilmington, Ohio, and Charleston, West Virginia. And we don't do that. There's places at the National Climatic Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina, and people in D.C. that look at long-range patterns. They look at oscillations of various pressure systems that are kind of semi-permanent, like the Bermuda High you've probably heard of, Charlie, and how they move and how ocean currents move, and La Nina and El Nino. I find those amusing. I've seen them successfully forecast seasons, and that's not my cup of tea. Our cup of tea is the first 3 days, getting it right for all of your listeners in the outdoor world.
And my hat is off to you, because I know enough to where if I'm watching the 8-day forecast that I know chances are it's going to be wrong. But those first 2 or 3 days of it, probably pretty close to being right.
Right. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's going to be 82 versus 87. I'm telling you for sure we're going to be warmer and above normal. And that's giving you some information so you can make some plans next week. Maybe you can get rid of your winter clothes, for example,
All right, let's address 2 of the most popular forecasts ever. One is, will there be a white Christmas? The second is, will there be an early spring, with Groundhog Day?
Right. There's 2 ways to look at that. One is the long-range forecast, which they put out in September, October frame. 2 is we start looking at the patterns of the atmosphere in very early December. They update that as you get closer to try to get if there's any major systems. In other words, we look in the atmosphere, Charlie, to see if there's changes in the jet stream where you have a trough of low pressure where cold air with more moisture will dip down, or a ridge where you get warm air that lifts up and over and would preclude like a white Christmas. Most people would like to see a white Christmas. They hear Bing Crosby. As far as spring, the thing about spring is spring can come and go and come and go, and then eventually comes. But, like you said, we talked about earlier, the mixed bag. 2007, I believe, was the year we got warm, really warm, and then we had that devastating freeze. It was devastating to agriculture in the state. Tremendous loss of money to the growers and people in agriculture and nurseries. And spring is more complicated because it can get warm. You get all these people get antsy. They got to go plant. And then what happens? You get a killing frost or freeze that just nukes everything they did.
Let me ask you this about public safety. There is a certain amount of time that the National Weather Service will act to put out a warning or a watch. Mm-hmm. But how much forewarning can you possibly give? There's a unit in the Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma called the Storm Prediction Center. They're in charge of the watch program across the nation. Their goal is to put out watches a couple hours before it initiates, at least that. And they're trying to give advance notice. They don't always get it right, but they're very good at what they do. They're usually pretty darn good. And then the local office, like here in Louisville or Jackson or Paducah, they do the warnings. And our job is to try not to cry wolf, but, also try to put out sound science and good information and get warnings out. Sometimes it's very, very, very challenging, whether you have these lines of storms and trying to figure out which one on these lines will produce a small spin-up tornado versus a day like March 2nd in West Liberty and in Milton and in Henryville and places like that, where we see these thunderstorms, we see them rotating, we know they're going to produce a tornado, and we can give 20, 30, 40 minutes of lead time downstream. But there's no lag time. The instant that you know that folks should take cover, you're on the horn saying so. In fact, we do speed drills on warnings. How fast can you get a warning out? Do people need to have an emergency kit, some extra food and water stashed away, and if so, where do they put it so it doesn't get blown away in the storm? Well, the best thing to do if you have a basement, that's the best thing in the world. Get in a basement, have a blankets,
have a little food thing with the batteries and maybe some candy bars or granola bars or something, flashlights. If you don't have a basement, get behind a stairwell. Get in an interior closet. Get in a bathroom, the sturdiest center bathroom in the house. They're going to have more studs. It's going to be a lot more support from the builder of your house. If you're in a mobile home, I'm telling you flat out, that is not a safe place to be if there's a tornado. I don't care if your mobile home is anchored. It's not going to survive a West Liberty storm, period. It will not. So you need to have a place that you can go to, a loved one, a neighbor, a friend, a community church, whatever the case may be. I tell people everywhere I go, Charlie, have a plan of action. Don't wait until West Liberty is bearing down on you.
So what do you do if you're driving down the road? What do you do?
Okay, if you're on the road and you hear of a tornado warning or the skies look this devastating ahead, pull over, get out of my car. Our car is nothing more than a missile that can be flown. The wind gets underneath, picks it up, and hasta mañana. So you get over into a ditch, a low-lying area, and you cover yourself and get as low as you can. You can't get low enough. Now, I'm talking about a tornado warning. If you're just a regular old thunderstorm, if it's even producing hail, stay in your car. The metal chassis protects you. If there's lightning, stay in your car and be patient. I'm talking, the first question was about a tornado.
Right.
A second time, if it's a flash flood warning, stay in your car. Make sure you're on never drive through a flooded stretch of road. Turn around, don't drown. Same thing with lightning. Thunder roars, move indoors, stay indoors.
And if you're turkey hunting in the spring and you're out in the woods,
yep,
and up comes a storm, what then?
Yeah, that's a kind of a problem. One thing is ahead of time you should be paying attention to the weather. Secondly, if you're turkey hunting and you're out there, make yourself a small target as you can. There's lots of trees out there. Don't be in a field with only you, the only tree. They're going to hit the tree, okay? If you're in the middle of a forest, the best thing to do is just kind of stay low to the ground, hunker down. It happens pretty quick. That's why I love boaters. I love water. However, if you're on a body of water, boaters never want to hear this, Charlie. What's the tallest object on a body of water?
Yeah, probably you sitting in the boat.
That's exactly right. And what part of me being in a metal boat sound good to me when there's a storm?
Nothing.
That's right. Benjamin Franklin would tell you not a good idea.
In that case, do you get off the water the instant there's lightning?
Oh, absolutely. You got to get off. Well, you see I'm telling you, everyone, Lake Cumberland, Rough River, we have so many beautiful lakes in Kentucky. What a great place to live. Green River. Get off the water when you see threatening skies. It's the same thing for the golfers. These golfers want to keep playing. If there's threatening skies and you have a metal club in your hand, what part of that makes sense?
Nothing.
Right. But they'll keep playing. They'll play, and when they get hit, believe me, it'll change their life.
We still have a segment to go with John Gordon, the Chief Meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Louisville. Hang with us. This is Charlie Baglin, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. Back in our final segment with John Gordon. He is the chief man in charge of the National Weather Service office in Louisville. And for the past hour, we've been talking about weather terms, how we try to predict it ourselves. Sometimes Mother Nature is a forecaster in herself. So, John, how can we rely on nature and folklore? Is there any validity to that at all?
Yeah, I wish I had my book in front of me. John Belsky here in Louisville has a weather folklore book. All the money goes to charity. He doesn't take a dime. He's got all kinds of stuff that I have seen truth to. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in the morning, sailor take warning. That works. The crickets and how you convert the cricket chirps to temperature, that works. The one that Belsky taught me, which I thought was really interesting, was about the spiders. If you see a fresh bunch of spider webs on your deck or porch, and it's all fresh, it's not going to rain. But if you see the spiders leaving their webs and you don't see any new webs, it's probably going to rain somewhere nearby. And he has shown me case after case where that is true. He'd be a good guest for you, too, Charlie.
He would be. John Belsky and I used to work together at Wave TV3. This was in 1990.
Okay.
And so I remember John, and I remember Tom Wills, too.
Tom's a good guy. Tom was the first meteorologist in Louisville.
I know Tom, and he's a great fella. You've spoken about TV weathermen a few times now, and you speak about them in highest regard. They, like you, I trust, have the same training meteorologically?
Each one is different. Like I said, years ago, Diane Sawyer and others, they did not have any training. They were just a pretty face. Most of the TV people are what I call meteorologists. There's a big difference between an online degree versus going through the classroom, the high mathematics. A broadcast meteorologist qualifications, they can get a meteorology degree, are a little less stringent as far as the mathematics than someone would be an operational meteorologist. Like Tom Wills, I believe, got his degree at Colorado State under Dr. Bill Gray, the hurricane forecaster. That's a tough school. I mean, he took some tough classes, and yeah, I do hold them in high regard because I need the TV weathermen and weatherwomen to take the warnings from the National Weather Service and broadcast them to protect lives and property. As I worry about your audience, the outdoors people who may not be aware of a tornado that may be heading toward them, or they may be on a lake fishing and they think they can go another 20 minutes as there's lightning in the distance. So I need them to broadcast all the products and get people safe. There is one meteorologist I have seen, but he'll say the National Weather Service is forecasting X. I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. Oh, I know who that is. And then he will come forth and say, this is what I've seen based on my experience. And he is so deliberate, not that he's cocky, but you want to believe him. So I guess let me just ask you that question. Do fellas like that ever really have a point? Well, first off, we are not always right. Weather's very humbling. It's very easy to cast aspersions on what we do. On the other hand, we're accountable to the American taxpayers. There are 2 or 3 TV Mets in my area. I cover 60 counties in Indiana and in Kentucky. I cover 5 markets, Evansville, Louisville, Bowling Green, Lexington, and Nashville. And there are 3 that seem to be more boisterous. I do talk to them from time to time, and we have interesting discussions. And the other hand, they're not always right either, which, as a public servant to the taxpayers, I have to be careful, but I don't mind calling out a TV Met on the phone if they cross the line. A TV Met, TV meteorologist. Meteorologist, M-E-T. Because it seems to me you two, the folks we hear on the radio and then see on TV, and you, the Federal Weather Authority, need to be on the same page. Well, yeah, we work together on warnings. It is rare to see a TV meteorologist on TV, a TV weather person, criticize a warning we issue. We don't issue warnings for ratings. We don't issue warnings for anything other than to get as many people as we can out of harm's way, whatever it may be. We communicate them behind the scenes that people on TV never see. We communicate with them on the phone. We communicate them in the chat rooms, through social media. So we're talking a bunch to our partners, both media, emergency managers, power companies. The National Weather Service is a federal agency and is part of NOAA, N-O-A-A. NOAA Weather Radio is a term that a lot of people have heard of, but they don't really know what NOAA means. What is that? Right, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So you do a whole lot more than just the weather. Yeah, that's the parent agency. They're in D.C. They do everything from fisheries to satellites to weather, oceans. What is the relationship between the National Weather Service and the Weather Channel? You're not one and the same. That's correct. The Weather Channel is a private enterprise in Atlanta, Georgia. The relationship is quite good. I have a lot of friends who work for the Weather Channel. It was for people like me, weather nuts. As far as your question, the Weather Service and the Weather Channel have a good relationship. The Weather Channel is a great market for the Weather Service to get information out and to get our warnings on a nationwide scale. My favorite thing is Dr. Greg Forbes. He worked under the legendary Dr. Ted Fujita, founder of the F scale for tornadoes. He knows severe weather better than just about anyone on the planet. I really tune it in just to watch him. Does the United States of America have the best forecasting capability on the planet? If we don't, I would say the United Kingdom is the other one. The main 2 powers in the weather forecasting in the world is the United States and also the UK service that's out of Bracknell, England. Both of those countries produce large-scale computer modeling. UPS planes report information back to the models, and all these computer models that both the United States and the United Kingdom put out is used by the world. I worry, like I told you earlier, I worry about the Derby. I worry about Oaks. I worry about Thunder Over Louisville, because you have so many people exposed what are they going to do if there's a tornado heading towards Churchill Downs? I get nervous. They can only put so many people in certain places. I get nervous over UK Commonwealth games over there in Lexington.
Well, let's end all this, John, on a good note. We live in Kentucky. We're familiar with the weather, although that's all we want to do is complain about it. Tell us why we need to be happy we live here weather-wise.
It's a great place to live in Kentucky. Kentucky's an awesome place to be. If you want some really bad weather where it's cloudy and rainy a lot of the year, go to Seattle. If you think it's hot here in the summer and you think you're going to die, go live in Brownsville, Texas, where the high every day is in the low 90s and the dew point is around 80 degrees, where it's a sweat-a-thon. If you don't like the weather here, go to the Indian Ocean, to La Reunion Island, where the world's rainfall record was set, Charlie, about 15 years ago. They got 72 inches of rain in 24 hours. That's 6 feet of rain in one day. You think it's bad here? Go to Death Valley. They had a record in 1930 of 134 degrees.
Let me ask you one last thing. Do you text and drive?
No, I do not. I do text, but I always pull over.
That's a good man. You've been very enlightening, and I sure appreciate the conversation.
You're welcome. Take care, Charlie.
We are out of time. My name is Charlie Bagman, inviting you to join us in a week, and we will go inside outdoors again right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.